Alrighty. So, welcome everyone on this beautiful Saturday, August 8th. We are kicking off with this virtual session as part of our Black Bottom Black Legacy Festival that is set to happen at the Charles H. Wright Museum next weekend, August 15th through the 16th. And this virtual session is called The Family Album, Preserving Stories Across Generations. And a big part of what we want to talk about today is to be in conversation with archivists, genealogists, storytellers, artists about the different ways that they practice memory, storytelling, and preservation. We want to ground this conversation in reflection and really consider how something like the family album can really symbolize the ways in which our history can come alive. And also lessons around how each of us can contribute to building a living record that we can pass along to future generations. I didn't already say, but my name is Marcia Black. I'm the co-executive director of Black Bottom Archives. I lead our archives and education work. I am a fourth generation Black Detroiter. I'm an archivist, oral historian, memory worker, and enjoy working at Black Bottom Archives, which, if you're not familiar with us, a great way to kind of understand our work is that we use intergenerational storytelling, community building, and archiving as ways to preserve the rich legacy of Black Detroit. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through a fellowship that we've been conducting since last August called Preserving Black Legacy. It's a fellowship which has been training a cohort of Black Detroiters in creating their own archive about their own neighborhoods. And that is a big part of what we're going to be celebrating at this festival next week is premiering each of these new archives that have been developed by these Black Detroiters that include oral histories that they've collected, um, art that they've made, and other ways that they've been going about creating a living record that they can pass along to future generations as well. Our name, obviously, if you are a Black Detroiter, you might be familiar with Black Bottom, but Black Bottom was a historically Black neighborhood in Detroit that really served as a landing place when we think about Black Detroiters and how we've come to blossom in the city. Black Bottom was destroyed as a result of urban renewal practices. At its height, Black Bottom was a place of community, a place of Black-owned businesses, important Black cultural institutions, and really kind of like the heartline of Black Detroit culture. And so, what we see ourselves celebrating with this festival is amplifying and celebrating the legacy of Black Bottom and also amplifying and celebrating the ways in which that legacy has contributed to other amazing neighborhoods that still exist in Detroit today that we know are making important contributions to Black Detroit history. So this might be the most that you hear me talk throughout the rest of this call, but I just want to give you some framing and introduction about who I am, who Black Bottom Archives is, and why we're having the conversation today. But to get to the most exciting part, which is to hear from our amazing panelists today, I'm going to read some bios. So I want to start by reading the bio of Miss Rosie Chapman, or Rosie Chapman, aka Miss Rosie. And so Miss Rosie, the storyteller Rosie Chapman, received her bachelor's degree in English with a theater minor from Bluffton University in Bluffton, Ohio, master's of social work degree from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and a master's degree in art education with an art therapy concentration from Wayne State University in Detroit. Miss Rosie is a featured performer who involves her audiences in the dramatic, energized storytelling experiences of unfamiliar as well as familiar multicultural folk tales, fairy tales, historical figures, and costume and life stories. Relating in the oral tradition, always engaging the audience, Miss Rosie sometimes accompanies the stories with songs and sometimes with African instruments. She calls her performance style as edutainment, always entertaining and educational through audience participation as actors in the presentation. Her one-woman shows in costume of Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Sojourner Truth, Madam C.J. Walker, Coretta Scott King, Marian Anderson, Maya Angelou, or the African Queen Mother thrill audiences of all ages. Miss Rosie has performed and held storytelling workshops in such diverse locales as Australia, Germany, Scotland, Ghana, and Senegal, West Africa. In the United States, she has performed and exhibited throughout Michigan, Connecticut, Texas, Florida, New Mexico, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. In addition to and in conjunction with her storytelling presentations, Miss Rosie has held exhibitions, written articles, and had numerous publications in the field of doll art. Some of her biographical books and sketches are doll making as a transformative process and Black Dolls Bold, Proud, and Beautiful. Miss Rosie was also a regular contributor to Art Doll Quarterly. Miss Rosie is a past president of the Detroit Association of Black Storytellers, featured performer with the Michigan Humanities Council for the Arts, and a member of the Art Therapist Association. And an honorable mention, Miss Rosie is one of our Black Bottom storytellers. So if you want to hear more about her and her connection to Black Bottom, because she is also a resident of Black Bottom. She grew up in Black Bottom. You can check that out on our YouTube. So, warm welcome to Miss Rosie.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Our next panelist that I want to introduce is Dr. Carolyn Halliburton Carter. She is a nationally respected historian, genealogist, and archival preservationist with over 30 years of experience in the conservation of historical knowledge and records. With deep expertise in document preservation, legal retention, and public history, Dr. Carter has dedicated her career to safeguarding the voices and lived experiences of underrepresented communities, particularly African American families and freedom seekers connected to the Underground Railroad. Welcome, Dr. Carter. Thank you for
Thank
being here
you.
today. And last but not least, we have Sierra King. Sierra King is a Southern Black woman whose words fall out of her mouth like molasses. An artist, archivist, and curator, she is interested in embodiment, memory work, nonlinear timelines, Southern colloquiums, musicianship, and dark matter. King holds a BA in art from Valdosta State University and was a social justice for archivist scholar at the University of Alabama and the Masters of Library Science and Information program. She is the founder and principal archivist of Build Your Archive, a nomadic memory work lab for Black women artists, cultural workers, organizers, and their communities. Her interdisciplinary practice presents photographic and archival installations in site-specific spaces that honor the land, how it's being kept and preserved. Also, honorable mention to Sierra has an amazing exhibit up right now about Kathleen Cleaver. So if you're in Atlanta, you
Yeah,
could check it out. So I hope you are able to do that. So warm welcome to Sierra. Thank you for being here today.
thank you.
Okay, so I want to kick it off. I read each of your bios, and so we have a version of an introduction, but I love to start by hearing from each of you, what drew you to this work and how do you preserve family history as a part of your practice? Dr. Carter, are you good to start?
I am. I am. Thank you very much for the question. For me, this journey began when I was 5 years old in Black Bottom, Detroit. My aunt introduced me to the artifacts that were my ancestors in the attic. And years later, in 1993, I got the opportunity to interview my grandmother and my great grandmother at the kitchen table. And I listened to them talk about who they were, what they did, how they lived in the South. And so that journey began for me then. And so I've been going strong ever since, finding ancestors, helping other people find their ancestors, connecting to stories. And so it's so important to me, especially in the space we're in today, culturally, that we as Black people record and know our own story.
Absolutely. Thank you.
How
I'll
did
go
I?
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um, yeah, what drew me to this work? Uh, I have a couple of like touch points, but the ones that are closest to me, was just a memory that I always hold on to is walking into my grandmother's living room. And when I walked into her living room, my great grandmother's, from like floor to ceiling, as long as I could remember, you would see family photos of yourself in gold frames and not in frames, and she had just curated this wall again, floor to ceiling. um, of who our family was and what that made up of. And I attribute that to being almost like one of the first galleries that I was able to step into and understand that photography was not only a tool, but a place where you recognize people who were important to you. And then also, there's a photograph of me when I was maybe like 6 years old, looking through my mother's wedding album, and that was a family album that I returned to, just because I think I've always been interested in how time works, and so it was a kind of like cheeky fact of, yes, she was at her wedding, but I was also there, like
Mm.
making that it known that I was at the wedding before I was born. And so yeah, those are kind of like my 2 points that I know that I understood what archiving and what holding Black memory means.
Archiving for me began when I was 13, I believe, and my mother bought me a camera, a Kodak film camera. And my mom didn't take pictures. She says, "You want to take pictures? Take pictures." So I started archiving at 13. And I'm the only one who really is the photographer of the family. And everybody, whenever, and it's kind of crazy because when somebody dies, they contact me for old pictures. And this has been going on for years now. So that's how I got into it. And my family makes sure I stay there. And I have hundreds and thousands of pictures. And
Beautiful.
I forgot to add in my bio too that I am a photographer.
Mm.
I am a photographer. I have pictures. I was shooting down at the Aretha for a while, amphitheater, and I have pictures from concerts of the last concert Aretha Franklin had. So I have lots of pictures.
That's amazing. Yes, yes, you are a photographer. Thank you for naming that too.
I forgot.
And thank you, each of you, for sharing just like, what your start was, and for each of you, how um, really like family does kind of become at the core of this work, and ends up being the thing that kind of pulls us into doing this work. One thing at Black Bottom Archives, we are very intentional about focusing on Black Detroiters, and a part of that comes from us wanting to challenge who gets remembered and who gets forgotten. And so I'm curious, in what ways has that question shaped your work?
I would say for me specifically, um, what gets remembered, specifically, we're in this celebration of America 250, and ensuring that the stories that are told for the next 250 years are remembered. And it's important, specifically in the Black community, because everything was based on oral history. We didn't have records until after emancipation. And so it's so important that we as Black people understand our history. When we're researching, we have to put our ancestors in the context of history. If they served in the Civil War, if they were appointed to a political office after Reconstruction, during the Civil Rights Movement, we have to, because we don't have a lot of documents, we don't have a lot of information. So in the world of genealogy, it's known as the fan method, your friends, neighbors, and associates that you associate yourself with when you're researching and looking for your family. I've developed my own methodology. I call it my story keepers method, which in the end, you're leaving a legacy. That's
Mm.
like step six. But in the end, you're leaving a legacy because it's important that we pass this history on to the generations. Our ancestors often passed down the pain, they didn't always pass down the good things. And so it's important that you talk to your relatives, you find out their story, and you record it, because that's the only way they're going to get remembered is if we write it down, because a lot of our ancestors are gone and we don't have that information, and so we have to start with what we have. We start from the known to the unknown.
A question that has shaped my work or would really began my work outside of my family was where are the Black women artists? And so when I was early in my college work as an artist and a photographer, I was looking for other examples of Black women artists that I wanted to research because in classes we were always writing papers about white men or white artists. And so I wanted to bring to the forefront, even just in my classes, like these are other things, other people that we could, and stories that we could be speaking about, rather than waiting for another like class to be on the survey for the next academic year. We can be talking about them within the context of like art history that we're thinking about in that time. And so that was like one of the questions that shaped the work that I was doing, and continue to do. And then also I think, when you're dealing with who gets to be remembered and who gets to be forgotten in our families, I think that's a very complicated and complex question, especially when dealing uh with stories that families don't want to tell, right? And so you're naturally coming up against barriers in your families that like they may not want to speak about their family members in that way, or they may not want to answer certain questions. And so their historic narrative gets lost within that point. But I think at the point that I am now, in the age that I am now, I think I have a bit more confidence in being able to talk with my aunts and uncles, to really get a more whole narrative of who our family is. And so I think, yeah, just with the friend method and trying to get more of the shared stories that, because I think also in the conversations of your family, what ends up happening is the closest person to them is the only one that knows their like innate like things that they did on their day-to-day basis, if they passed on. And so if they no longer have that connection, that shared intimacy between their friendship or their family relationship also gets lost. And I think capturing that, whether that be like oral histories like Dr. Carolyn, or looking back into the photographs of like getting touchstones that make it easier to say like your family member like going to dances, like what kind of dances did y'all learn, like trying to pull out the things without it being revisiting the trauma so much.
Yes, I agree. Talking to family members about things that they don't want to talk about is also important. You may not want to relive the trauma, but talk about some things that most family members don't know about that we'd like to leave as a part of our legacy is also very important because some of the famous relatives, people at our family that have been in the history books or been on the news with positive things, everybody knows about them. But what about my Uncle Dip, who never talked? And what do we know about him? And how can we share his story in our way of exhibiting our art or doing our art, as well as writing little short stories, as well as sharing our stories at family reunions instead of just at funerals?
Hmm.
I love that. Thank you. And there's something, Miss Rosie, you kind of mentioned is like, oftentimes it is easier to get familiar with the histories of folks that have been like deemed extraordinary in some way. But like, all of the everyday folks that, might not fit in that category at first thought, but also are still worthy of being remembered. And there's so much to be lost when we don't, make that an effort of like, yeah, what was your uncle's name again?
Uncle Dip,
Uncle Dip.
his name was Lonnie Bryan, but we called him Uncle Dip. He dipped snuff, and
Okay.
we always
Yeah.
called him
And
Uncle
like,
Dip.
what's the story behind that, right? Like,
Right, right. What
yeah.
his name? Right, like you said, Uncle Dip. So yeah, and my son, who's now 54, I think, um, he remembers Uncle Dip because I made sure when he was growing up, Uncle Dip didn't talk, but we're going to go by and see Uncle Dip, and
Hmm.
I'm going to take me a picture of Uncle Dip.
Hmm.
So that's a part of the legacy of Uncle Dip, and my son recognizes that as well, and as old as he is now.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your responses. I want to pass it to you, Dr. Carter, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, which is around the complicatedness of Black folks having access to official records because of slavery and like the legacy of that and how we're impacted by its consequences. So I'm curious for you, folks often think about genealogy, they think about these more official paper documents and things like that. But what are some of the like less obvious places that people can find clues about their family history?
Well, thank you for that's a really good question, specifically when you're talking about the enslaver. For me specifically, I research what I have at home, your family archives, your Bible, your family records, funeral programs, whatever you have at home. Everyone has a family archive. You start there and you put those pieces together, but you almost have to become a detective because you have to look at those documents with a keen eye to figure out when they were created, who created them, who witnessed them, as you build these stories together. And for those of us who have enslavers, many of our people were free. And I tell people, first of all, enslavement was a horrible condition. It's not a culture. So you're not a descendant from slaves. And when you are researching to find your enslaver, um, you've got to research that enslaver just as much as you research your family, because remember, we were property. Our ancestors were property. And so you have to research him. And that's how I found my enslaver on my mother's side. I've researched my enslaver on my father's side. Um, and I've walked that plantation during the pandemic. After my mother died from the pandemic, I had to get out of the house. And so I walked that space where my ancestors lived. And my great grandmother knew her grandparents. So I was able to go back a couple more generations. And so when I found that will inventory, remember, you're looking for the inventory of the enslaver, the property, and it listed some of my great grandmother's siblings and how much their lives were worth. It was very emotional to find that type of document that was just put out there on a photo sharing site like Flickr. And
Mm,
so when you don't have the documents, you start with your own family archives, and then you build from there. And you're going to have to get from behind the computer. You can't find everything online. You have to go to where your ancestors lived and go to the library and the archives in that state, and the little librarian that works in the library in Mississippi and in Georgia and in Tennessee. You need to go there and visit and see what archives they have, because a lot of things are not digitized. They're just not digitized for the computer. So you have to get from behind the computer and go look for those documents.
thank you. And thank you for like, that extra push for people to, um, yeah, to not be deterred by, I couldn't find it online, so that thing must not exist at all. Like that's not at all the totality of it. Everything is not on the internet. All of the archives are not digitized. And so thank you, Dr. Carter, for bringing up that point that it sometimes really does require that in-person sort of interaction
Yes.
with the records to find what you're looking for.
Yes.
I think with
Uh,
something, I'm sorry, with something very important with that too. I have an aunt who passed, but years ago, my aunt went and researched our family after slavery was over and when they had to start documenting, like in the census. So my aunt researched all of this information, created the family tree. So we
mm,
have a family tree going back to 1864, I believe, 1865, when our first relatives that she found in North Carolina, I believe it was, and then from there moved to Alabama. So that's how we were able to trace our history, because she created the family tree and documented everything with everybody's lineage on it, all the way up to me and my son. So
hmm
we need to, now that she's gone, we need to continue to document our family tree with all
hmm
these new kids coming along that are not on what my aunt had done years ago. And we're
mm,
very thankful for that book that she created, this copies that she did and stapled together and made sure everybody got a copy.
right. Yeah, thank you for naming that. And I remember Dr. Carter starting off talking about how everybody has, a version of a family archive. So also being curious about who in your family has already been doing that work. Because you oftentimes are not starting from scratch. There's other people that have felt called to do that work of preserving family history. So, figuring out where are you picking it up from and not just assuming that you have to start from scratch is also a good place to, get into that exploration. And I want to ask a kind of like a question building on that, which is how do you balance researching or archiving with honoring family stories that may exist primarily through oral traditions?
Well,
Yeah.
for me, um, you have to understand because our stories were not written. You have to kind of build a case for your family, the good and the bad. And you have to understand that they lived creative lives and they did things based on the resources that they had. And so, in the absence of records, you have to piece their life together again from those associates and those neighbors and people who are around them in their stories and the organizations and the churches where they worked. And remember, women specifically are harder because everything they had was predicated on the man. They couldn't vote, they couldn't own land. Everything was based on who they were married to, but Black people were not allowed to marry. So it's even more difficult when you're looking for our women. Our women often, many times, they did not take the last name of the husband. Sometimes they took their father's last name. Sometimes they switched their first name and their last name. And so we don't want a name to be a brick wall when we're researching our ancestors in the absence of records. And so I teach my students when I was teaching to learn how to spell your ancestor's name incorrectly and spell it like
Mm,
10 times the way it sounds, because you're going to find it that many ways and more because they spelled things the way they sounded, not the way we spell them today. And so there are
mm,
many obstacles and things can present brick walls for you when you're researching, but it takes time. This is not an overnight process. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of time, a lot of research. I'm still researching, still finding stuff after 30 years. So it takes time, but every step forward is better than a step backwards.
mm. Absolutely. Thank you. And I really love what you mentioned too about the spelling piece. I'm definitely going to kind of walk away from that thinking about that.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. I'm working on, not a shameless plug, but I am working on a book project called Finding Your Enslaver. And I want to make that a comprehensive publication for people who are looking for, and I'm including a piece on DNA and AI and women and wet nurses and things like that. So, because I haven't seen anything like this. So I'm writing based on my experience, based on research, and so that the next generation will have a document to use as a guide.
Thank you.
I had never thought of that myself. The enslaver. Who was our massa? Who was massa? I never thought of that. I would love to do that. I can hardly wait for your book to come out.
Yes,
Thank you.
same, same.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you
So
got
that's
to know
there.
him. I found mine, and when I
Wow.
connected with my descendants, the descendants of it took me about 3 years, though, really, because it was an emotional find. And what do you say to them? And I finally just like, whatever. My name is Dr. Carolyn Carter, and I think your family own mine. And they laughed and we
Wow.
talked and they invited me down to visit. And the interesting thing is they knew less about their family than
Mm.
I did. They knew that their ancestor was an enslaver, but they didn't pass those stories down. They still have cotton. All
Mm,
the people are buried in the back of the plantation. It's
Wow.
still the same house. And of course, when I went, I was like, where the Black people buried? So um, so yeah, so you've got to find and learn that person. On my paternal side, my four times great grandfather Charles Whiteside. He served in the Confederacy. He went to the Confederacy with his slave owner son as his slave.
Mm,
He was sold four times, so he took the name of his
Mm,
last enslaver. So he was not born a Whiteside; he was born a Bond and a
mm.
Boxley, and so he took the name of his last enslaver. Um, and so
wow.
we've had to research Robertson Whiteside, the enslaver, to find out who he was and why did he sell his mother and brother at when he was 8. And he finally reunited with his mother when he was in his 80s, right before she died. She was sold to a
Ah,
Texas slave trader. So a lot of research. You get to know the people in the archives in those little towns by first name. You call them all the time. Find this record for me. Find this. Do you have this? And there, many of them are welcome that opportunity because they want to share that information. And this stuff is not digitized. So you've got to get from behind your computer.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Dr. Carter. Can I ask it? Ask it?
Yes.
What about our roots back to Africa, to motherland? How do we
Well,
do that? How do we do that?
Well, first you need to take the DNA test, and I know people are hesitant about the DNA, but I'm like, whatever the government want to know about you, they already know, and they took blood when you were born, so they have your DNA. Um, so, and I tell people that, and I've made some wonderful discoveries using my DNA. I connected with my Irish ancestors.
Oh,
Uh, um, through DNA. My great grandfather, father, I connected with their family through DNA. And so I think it's important, I found out that my great grandfather was Irish and Black. My grandfather was Jewish and German and Black. My great grandmother was Native American and Black. So I'm quite the mixture. I'm 16% Ashkenazi Jew. Um, and so it just opened up a world for me, um and it showed me where I am from Africa, and I've been to Nigeria, so I've walked that space, and knowing that most people don't know, but as Henry Louis Gates indicates, 98% of Black people in the United States have European DNA.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's very, very important that if you want to make those connections as well as relative connections, um, um, I'm an advocate for DNA.
Thank you.
Hmm.
And Sierra, I'm curious, what's your thoughts about, how do you balance archiving with honoring family stories? Yeah.
Currently in my practice, I use the archive as a starting point. I like to say I begin and end at the archive. Although, um, not saying I never will, but I currently don't work with the actual photographs, or like include photographs in my pieces. So if I'm reproducing anything or writing or making a speculative narrative, I start with the archive, but it doesn't necessarily have to include photos that I'm looking at, if that makes sense. And that's just out of respect for the family members that I'm using their photos, but more so to think about the experience and the memory that photos holds, and how can I push that into a derivative of a piece, or another object. I know of artists that do use actual photos from their archive, like whether it be like photo transfers or placing them in quilts or reproducing them and including them in installations. Um, it's just for me, that hasn't been the actual process. As far as other research, and if I do include photos from ancestors and things, instead of using originals, I would scan them and do reproductions, so I'm not losing the integrity of the archive, of my personal archive, but it's just a reproduction that can be used over time. And that's kind of like a process materiality type of choice. Um, I do find myself process wise, I showed the hand casting that I worked with, that it does after installation, I'll like not be in my studio for like months at a time. Because it's like just one piece that you're working on or installation, it takes like a lot of research or a lot of energy and to create or even just like a lot of prayer, honestly. And so taking breaks in between my studio practice, whether I move back into like couture work or move back into administrative work is very important because I don't think I could. I mean, maybe if I was more sustained financially, I could like afford the rest, afford the rest, and afford like uh the things needed to rest and continue a like daily studio practice, but I think a daily studio practice like requires more of that. But I'm in and out of my studio months at a time. Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to bring the question back to home. So oftentimes, people hear archives, they think about these big institutions, but in a lot of ways, we're thinking about archives as it relates to our homes. And so I'm curious for each of you, what role do you see home playing in preserving family histories? And what does that look like when home is destabilized, which we know happens for a variety of reasons in Black communities? A lot of them systemic, sometimes environmental. But yeah, and from your perspective, what role does home play in preserving family histories?
For me specifically, I mean, that's the origin. That's where everything starts. Um, that's where our family histories began. And if we are in a situation or our families are in a situation where it's unstable and the information isn't connected, I think organizations like this and other community organizations can come together and create projects where people can come and tell their stories. I participated in a project a few years ago, and I worked with some high school students, and we had what was called Ancestors Day. And so we had people come in and bring an artifact, um, and they could talk about it. And we recorded and took a picture of the artifact. I think the community, our churches, our organizations, I've done sessions for churches and other um, outside organizations where people can share that story. There's always a family member who knows all the dirt, that may not want to talk about it or may want to talk about it. And so I think we have to provide opportunities for people to share their stories, no matter what they are. We have trauma. I have trauma in my ancestors. I had a relative who killed somebody, a couple of them. And and we have to provide an opportunity, because I think specific with our older people, as they get older and their memories fade and they don't have access to tell those stories, it's important that we figure out a way to get to them so that we can record their stories and find out who they are. Because many of these people living in these senior buildings and these facilities are very important and significant people that people just don't know. And they don't have family members to visit them. Nobody wants to know the story. Younger people, that's old, that happened in the past. And so we have to figure out a way to bridge that gap between younger people and older people as well, I think, and helping them understand that, first of all, not all of our ancestors were enslaved, some of them were free. And the people that you come from are great. They lived great lives, and you are here today because they survived it. We have to make them understand that.
Hell yeah, totally agree. And I experienced that feeling when my sister and I went to see my grandmother as a side trip from seeing a niece graduate from high school. This was probably almost 30 years ago. And I said, we're going to go to Florida. We're in Atlanta. Yeah, let's go to see grandma. So we went to see grandma, and that's when it dawned on me. I've never sat and talked to my grandmother, really, really talked to her about quilting, about her life. And so I always carried a camera with me. I had a video camera that particular time too. So I video recorded on film my grandmother telling me about quilting, how she made her first quilt and how she did quilting with people in, growing up, and you had a quilters circle. And all the people got together, women got together, during a certain day, a certain time, and helped you do your quilt. And she gave me the process, but it's all on video. And so I think that's very important that we record these people, not just write down what they're saying, but also put it on video. Besides just a still picture, put it on video. And with the video, because of social media and everything, I was able to upload the video and it's in a file for all the family members to see of grandma. And those who didn't know grandma can go back and see grandma and her talking about her last quilt that she made, the last block she made. But her talking and my mother standing behind her, braiding her hair, and my mother chiming in. And it's a really cool video. So yeah, it's another way of archiving.
Oh, absolutely.
Video.
Absolutely. And we have to teach our young people how to do that.
Yeah.
Because when you're interviewing someone, and in my 10 years of teaching on the college level, a lot of people were afraid, didn't know what to say. You're not
Mhm.
going to get the information out of them by asking them what happened when you were 5.
Mhm.
You're going to have to figure out a way. Say, for instance, they collected antique plates or teacups. Let that be the story. You'll
Mhm.
get more information out of them because that was something that they enjoyed doing. They don't like talking about the pain and what happened after enslavement and Reconstruction and the Civil Rights era and how they were moved and someone got killed and, they were chased, and they don't like talking about that. But they will share other stories. And, if you are a strategic researcher, you will find those stories along the way, um, in newspapers, in other documents. But in order to preserve what they have and what they know, you have to be strategic in how you ask them those questions.
Absolutely.
I think just as important as it is the actual sitting down with them is I've had the privilege of living with my grandparents since I was 17 on and off. And so within these 15 years me and my mother and my sisters were caregivers for our grandparents until they passed. And so just the privilege of the day-to-day life with them is that embodied experience that many people don't get the don't are able to have these days. So anytime, like you said, that you can give to them is valuable, and not in a strategic way, just sitting at the kitchen table with your grandmother, sitting at the TV watching a movie with your grandfather, will be something that you'll be able to hold to onto, and they'll be able to remember until they pass. And I think um as you're building that relationship over time, the interview or whatever you want to film or whatever you want to write with them will be easier because you've invested and gave that back to them just as like they did when they were raising you. So I think it's just finding a relationship rhythm that we all seem to kind of like have ebbs and flows in. Now that I'm in my 30s, I'm having to find a new relationship with my grandmother because she still feels like I'm 5. So it's like, how do we bring these conversations into the present day, and how can we find a rhythm within our current lives that are not only benefiting us now in our time that we have with them now, but are able to make that interview, are able to make that writing the story of them a little bit easier. And I think when we think about archiving, so to speak, archiving is a broad field. And when we attach the home to it, I would say you're moving into the field or like the sector of preservation. And you feel like sometimes that the preservation of a home is only deemed necessary for our celebrity figures like a Nina Simone or a Zora Neale Hurston or someone that wrote like a famous book. But I think like the vernacular side of it or the ordinary people side of it is like don't sell your grandmother's house or keep a family home in the family so that everyone has somewhere to return to, somewhere where those memories were made, that like we're preserving a space for our family to continue to gather. I think one of my favorite memories to even return to is my grandmother's porch and how she cultivated that space for anyone to walk into. It wasn't necessarily um, just a place for our family, but friends and strangers and anyone walking down the street could come and get a plate of food off of her porch or come and get clothes during a yard sale, even if they didn't have any money or things. So when we're thinking about how we're preserving these memories, we're also having to, as archivists and memory workers, thinking about how can we strengthen these activities that we are trying to even hold on to ourselves. Like, how can we continue making a family reunion more marketable to our cousins to come to, or more advantageous for the babies to want to play in the backyard rather than sitting on their iPads and their phones and let's start climbing trees again, you know? And so I think there's like two sides of wanting to keep the records, but it's also like how do we invigorate that rhythm of the relationship building again within our families, so that the records are secondary, yes, for the future, but we're still sustaining our family's energy and who we are as people and how we share love in that way.
Thank you so much. And I love how can we make the babies want to climb trees again?
Mm.
Because yes, that part. Um, so I want to Sierra, continue to ask you kind of another follow-up question. I know one of the things that you've been doing with your work with Build Your Archive is you have been, kind of documenting yourself doing your own family archival work. And so I'm curious if you could share what are some simple, accessible ways that families can begin preserving some of the items like photos or letters or documents that they have at home.
Um, I would say not be overwhelmed with what you don't have. Um, like Dr. Carolyn said, pretty much all of what you need is kind of in front of you to start. And so if you have a photograph, you have a piece of paper to write descriptions down and the names and things. And then once you start writing those descriptions and things, then you can kind of get into the like the archival materials, but again, you're kind of like running up against time sometime some in some instances. So just starting with one photograph with writing the name, the time, the date, and it's a simple practice that your grandmothers probably have already been doing as far as like caption writing. So when you bring up these things, is like just I like to introduce the method or reintroduce the method that we learned in middle school of the five W's of who, what, where, when, and why, to say that you can answer those questions and kind of go deeper into what you need to know for that one photograph. Um, yeah, and it's really one at a time. Like, don't overwhelm yourself with an entire collection of 500 and try to spread them all out on the table. It is necessary that you have a space that isn't um, can't be moved at some period. So if you want to make a desk area, or if you want to have a little corner, or if you want to have a small altar space that is just designated for archiving or archival work, because eventually you'll start getting into it as a daily practice, to where it's like just as you get up and take a drink of water, maybe the first thing that you do in the morning is drink your water and then write a photo description.
Mm,
How can you involve yourself with your archive within the continued routines that you already work inside of your life, so it's
mm,
not a task that's outside of your um, capitalistic work or outside of the preservation work that you're doing on self-care work, but it's intertwining itself so that you just it yeah it becomes an automatic habit to say I'm going to drink a glass of water, I'm going to light a candle, and I'm going to write a photo description, right? And I think that is also kind of innate to some of the uh, artistic practices when you come up against Black women artists that are already working in the fine art field or working in artistic practices. They have like their touchstones and touch points throughout the day that they're using, but it really, once you write those systems and processes down for yourself as like kind of like studio rules or house rules, it really shows itself within the work that you're building, and also again that relationship rhythm that you're providing for yourself. And for me, um, because I love structure so much, I can get down to like the second of like how I'm spending my time.
mm,
But as life hits you and as like the ebbs and flows of becoming a woman and um just yeah everything in between, you have to be flexible even with that. And so one day it may be drinking your water and you might not write a photo description, right? But being okay with it not being done. So being okay with like the different routines that are happening and not necessarily in a linear order, but you're still making time for them. It's all about making time rather than controlling time.
mm. I love that. Thank you. And also just like, you know, archiving is never a done project. It's never a done thing. History is being created every day. And so I think there is kind of like, we can get overwhelmed if the goalpost is to I'll be done when this. And it's just not that. So I really love what you suggested about how do I make this as a part of my routine? How does this become a part of my lifestyle and maybe even extend to a part of our like family culture, where like each of us are finding different touchstones for how we're like contributing to this work collectively. Because it's also not something to be done in isolation. Sometimes it happens that way, but really this is work that's best done like amongst, your loved ones, your community, whoever that looks like. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to switch to you, Miss Rosie, and have you talk a little bit more about, how creative practices like writing, performance, making art also become forms of family archiving.
Writing, performing, all of that. Yeah, it's really kind of strange how the storytelling um, started by doing characters and historical figures. I shouldn't say characters, but it has grown into other areas. Like, for example, a friend of mine asked me to perform storytelling at her grandmother's birthday party. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Harriet Tubman? She goes, no, I want you to do my grandmother's story. So they gave me all the facts, and I performed as a old friend of hers or an old neighbor of the grandmother's, and I was telling her life story at her birthday party. So that's a way of storytelling by reenacting that person's life at an occasion. It doesn't have to be family reunions. It could be a birthday party. It could be an anniversary. It could be anything where you could have the story told of that person and not wait until the funeral. That's one of those things that I had never thought of myself. And so after that, I started doing it for my family and doing our family members' history. And of course, when I did for that grandmother, she would chime in. No, that's not what happened. No, that didn't happen. It was like this. So it involved her actually continuing her life story and sharing. So that's another way of archiving, so to speak.
Mhm.
And as well as like I said, recording, taking pictures, but the storytelling, the oral history, the oral way
Mhm.
of sharing our stories is, part of our heritage. So we
Mhm.
need to get back to
Yeah,
that oral history. We
absolutely.
need to get back to oral history. And because of social media, again, you could put that stuff on video and put it on YouTube, do a TikTok. There's so much these young people like to
Mhm.
do. Y'all do that, okay? Do TikTok.
And
Grandma.
Rosie, I totally agree with you. I think don't discount you and your siblings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my siblings, we take a trip together every year, um, and we get together no matter what it is. And every holiday, every event, we record something or take film of something, take pictures of something. And so don't just young people specifically get with your siblings and talk about things and record it. So it's not just the elders, it's the younger people too, because you're creating an archive for the descendants that come behind you.
No matter what age,
Yes.
no matter what age you are.
And love to think back to the point of like reenactment because I think that's one of my favorite like family things to do.
Hmm.
And it's really a point of like ancestor veneration because everyone will get into like their own voice of that person
Mm-hmm.
and start saying the sayings that they said and like we remember like my great grandmother in ways that like she treated us and like you'll find yourself saying go sit down somewhere. Like I think we were talking about accents and how that's like a lost a way of in the future that we're going, but I feel like at least for my family here in the South, like when I get closer to them, I can't understand myself because because all the words start going together. But yeah, definitely the storytelling between us is very lively and colorful, and I love when we are able to get together and you're not able to understand anything anybody's saying and it all jumbles together, but somehow there's a story in there somewhere that they're talking about the collard greens that was on the pot and somebody got slapped and so very very like I might have a couple of recordings like where during like Thanksgiving or things and people you just hearing the sounds in and out of the rooms coming in and so yeah, I think just sitting with your friends and your families and documenting that shared experience or even documenting how people talk to each other with each other and about people is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I do just want to say, Sierra, the thing you just mentioned about someone's hand going to the pot and the hand getting slapped, it brought me to a story Miss Rosie shared, which shameless plug, you have to go to our digital archive to hear it in full. But you shared this really funny story that whenever we play the clip, there's a full house of laughter, which is the story about you and your sister B, and when you got your Goodfellows boxes,
Mm-hmm. The doll.
the
And you're supposed
doll,
to open the
and
box.
then you cut
Mm-hmm.
somebody cut a hole in the
My
box.
sister B cut the hole in the box. And we both got beat and didn't get the doll from the Goodfellas that year. I'll never forget it. I'm glad
Oh,
you.
I remember the Goodfellas. I got those too.
Yep, you got the little dress. Everybody wore the same plaid dress to school right after
Yes.
Christmas.
Yep. Got those too. Yep.
I
Oh.
love it. So the next question I want to ask is, um, we're kind of in this place of kind of talking about what are some of the creative ways that we can get into doing archiving. And so, we know a photograph or a document can be one of the ways that we preserve moments, but we also do it. But that doesn't always get to the story, which I think each of us have kind of talked about. So, in what ways do you, as artists and storytellers, help to bring those histories to life? And in a minute, we're gonna be able to screen share Rosie and Sierra. I know y'all submitted some images of some of the art that you all do. Um, and in a minute, one of those things will pop up and you'll be able to talk about it. But is somebody down to kind of kick off that conversation of like, how do you help to bring those histories to life in your work?
For me, we have technology. We have to use technology. And sometimes people don't want to give up their pictures and their information, and you got to pry it out of them. And so you have to, you're the family griot now, if you're going to step into that space. And so it's your responsibility to collect that information. And it's not easy because people don't respond. They only do things when they feel like it, or I don't have that. And then when they see the final product, they're like, oh, wow, that looks so nice. So I think that we have to use the technology that we have right now. We can take things with our phone. We can take pictures with our phone. When you go to visit relatives, they don't like to give up their pictures and their documents. Take a picture of it, for the archives. I've got many pictures on my phone going to visit my aunts and things where they wouldn't give me the originals. So I took a picture of it with my phone and put it in my archive. So use technology the best that you can to start recording and getting that information and then transpose that. The many repositories will take your stories and put them in the stacks forever. Family History Library in Salt Lake City will take your handwritten, typewritten, whatever you have, family histories, and they'll put it in their stacks and you can use it as a resource too forever. Many libraries will do that as well. The Burton Historical Library will do that. They will take your documents and they'll take your files and your archives and they'll put them in a repository so you can use them and they'll be there forever. And so you got to just start. The goal is to start. And it's not a race. It's not a sprint. You're at your own pace. Go ahead and start and get the information that you want for your family. And as you see, they left breadcrumbs for us. We just have to follow them.
Hmm.
My brother is using old pictures and asking relatives of old pictures that that I don't even have, and he's tweaking them and making them look better and making them look brighter. And we have on Facebook we have a family Facebook page where we're posting all this stuff, so people can go to that page and, oh, there's a picture of Uncle Buddy. Oh wow, there's a picture of Uncle Dip. That's my Uncle Dip, and yeah, there's a picture. And so now everybody has access to those pictures because of social media, because of Facebook and Instagram. And that piece there was about Uncle Dip, who never talked. I mean, he talked very seldom. He didn't talk a lot. But I created that piece from a cigar box and painted it. And Uncle Dip was from Forkland, Alabama, and he had picked cotton, and then he decided to get out of Alabama and move to Canton, Ohio. Well, anyway, that piece is just shows you I would just go over to his house all the time and take a picture of him. That's one of the pictures I took of him sitting on the front porch, talking about front porch, conversations on the front porch. Or he was sitting, watch, and look out the window. And that's him, that's an example of him looking out the window. And Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen. Took that out of a songbook. So anyway, and he had his wish to live in peace. And there's a story behind everything in that work of art.
Beautiful. Thank you, Miss Rosie. And I know, can you share a little bit more about what your art practice looks like? Because I know that you do collages, you also do photography, and you do some
Ah,
quilting. Yes.
yeah, that's Uncle Dip again. And Uncle Dip, I made a quilt of one of the pictures I took of him again, and I made a wall hanging. And another thing about Uncle Dip and our wallpaper when we were growing up, that's a part of that art piece because the wallpaper in our house on Hunt Street was flowers. And we have maybe two pictures of us sitting on the sofa with that flowered wallpaper. And when I saw that fabric at Joanne Fabrics, I knew I had to have it for the background for that. So that quilt is a story in itself. And my Uncle Dip liked to wear denim shirts, denim button-up shirts and stuff. And so that was also a part of that quilt. And he always wore a hat. So yeah. So my art, whether it's fabric art, fiber art, whether it's painting, mixed media, I use everything. Nothing is safe with me. Paper. I'm doing a lot of collage is with paper, and I do that with friends and family, and have them create their own pieces with painted paper torn up. So nothing is safe with me anymore. And I became an artist because I wanted to go to school to become an art therapist. And I had never had art in my life. Didn't know I could be an artist. I was a doll artist, but creating all this stuff, nah. So anyway, you're never too old. So I got my second master's. I think I was 60, I think I was 60, 61, something like that. So you're never too old to go back to school. And I had to take 18 credits of art before they would let me graduate with that master's. So anyway, I took art and I said, I'm an artist. Yay. So anyway,
Yeah,
that's how I share. That's how I do everything that I do and recreate, take my photography and turn it into my art.
it's beautiful. Thank you, Miss Rosie.
And I wanted to say one last thing. When I worked on my my paper for when I got ready to graduate, the paper I wrote was using photography as a therapeutic tool for middle class Black women.
Hmm.
That's what my paper was written on. My study was, and they told me there was never anything done on that. And I said, yeah, well, that's why I'm doing it. And we as Black women, that can be our therapy as well as archiving our history.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank
Okay,
you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you. And I'll pass it to you, Sierra.
Well, this was a picture of my great grandmother. She's in all the way on the back, s- talking, I believe, with a rib in her hand. To someone that I don't know, but her porch was adjacent to like the door that you first walk into to the kitchen. And so like once you walk out to the kitchen, you walk outside to the porch. So generally this was where like everyone would be like playing cards or talking or laughing like during summer visits and things like that. And so I I used this was one of the pictures that I had used to start thinking about porch sitting as a daily practice, and how we can continue porch sitting as a meditative practice, as a research practice, as an embodied archival practice to um, understand time, how time passes in a way, so that we're getting away from like the our phone doom scrolling on our phones early in the morning. And so it became like something that I could um like I said, integrate into my own like personal practice to say my grandmother sat on her porch for hours. So how can I like it not become something that is taking away from my life, but adding to it in that way. And so yeah, I think about porch sitting a lot. I sit on my grandmother. I live in my grandmother's home now, so sitting on her porch, and the one that I have. Um, I think there was a another piece that it was the second one. It wasn't necessarily a piece, but this was just from a adjacent presentation. Just to give people, because I don't have many photos of the actual, I'm still looking for photos of the actual room that had the floor to ceiling photos. And so just to give people an idea of what that looked like, I created like a digital gallery of like how the photos were um, displayed on the wall as best to my memory, but also kind of adding a speculative element of since both of my families were blended, displaced by divorce and things like that, like uh how our photographic timelines and memories kind of like meld together in that one particular thing. I don't know if y'all are gonna pull it up or not. The second one. Um yeah, it just shows that if they're able to see see it again. Uh,
Ah, there it is.
yeah. So these are two different sides of my family, but in the same curation type of style or gallery style that my great grandmother had in her home. And so I kind of just pieced together different photographs that I continually return to as places of sites of memory, as Toni Morrison would say, to help me in my practice and kind of lead me to other things of information. And lately, really, I've been interested in jewelry making since I inherited my grandmother's jewelry collection. So I don't have a picture of it, but um, the I had been making charm bracelets for a project that I worked on with an Emory nursing student, and each of the charms have been delegated a specific Black feminist text. So like a rose would be all about love, or a made with love charm would be beloved, or it was another like seashell charm that would go towards dang, I would forget it. Salt Eaters by Tony K. Bambara. So thinking about how like charms and touchstones can be socially prescribed in a way that allows people to kind of recollect their memories, to say, oh, I can go back to this resource in my personal library if I remember that it's on the charm bracelet. It's a longer thing of like uh you receiving a charm every time you go to a doctor's office, rather than
Mm.
um uh just leaving cold and and poked.
Mm,
That was all about Black women's health experiences in the field. So we wanted to give them back something like a charm bracelet um to point them back to resources that they could continue to return to. So that's kind of how my research and archival and art practice and object making lately has shown up.
Beautiful. Thank you both for sharing your amazing art. Miss Rosie, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that's really cool. The idea of the charm. That's very unique.
I personally am a chronically ill Black woman myself, and so I spent a lot of my childhood in doctor's offices, and sometimes they would leave me with lollipops
Mm,
and things after poking me, and other times I would just be left screaming and kicking.
mm,
And so, and even thinking about my grandmother and her like last years of her life of enduring cancer, is like, how do we continue to nurture these people and continue to mold the experiences that they're having within these places, and make them a bit more warmer, a bit
mm,
more bearable. And I know, like, as we're moving outside of institutional hospitalized places and healthcare centers, that people are kind of creating their own private practices and community practices that are a bit more warmer. So I would definitely like to introduce like these, like, I'm calling them jewelry boxes and libraries, to those like private practice spaces where this could be something that can happen like in real time.
Mm.
that's cool. Very nice.
Yes, thank you to you both. And I'm gonna simulate a virtual round of applause for you because it's really amazing. And we are coming to a close. So there's just like a couple closing questions that I want to ask each of you. The first one is, what is one resource you'd share with people to help them get started with preserving their family archive?
I wrote something down. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. I gotta find it.
Um, I mean, it's not a shameless plug. If you find me anywhere on the internet, it's buildyourarchive.com. And I usually my most active place is my newsletter, so I send that out regularly of what I'm working on, and then also if I get just some downtime, I'll go deeper into uh, materials and research and things I'm thinking about. And some days that's quantum physics and dark holes and matter and things like that, and how you can connect that back to your view on time and stuff like that. So, and other days it's just use a ruler and use a ruler and see how big your photo is and get familiar with the sizing of photographs. And so it's a wide range of like how I choose to share. But if you go to buildyourarchive.com, there's a archive Airtable database that you can copy and start using that copy database um, to build your archive or place the information of your archive in one place, at least digitally. And it has already like um, a roadmap, like week by week in it that you can follow. So yeah.
Good job. I don't have any of that. I had to Google it because my aunt did everything. So I didn't have to look up any information about our family. But anyway, a family search using the federal census records is free from 790 to 1950. You can look at the census records. And another one is the National Archives, where they have census microfilms and digital rolls online, or visit a regional facility that is a National Archive.
Beautiful. Thank you both. These are some amazing resources. I hope our virtual listeners are taking notes. And then my final question is, can each of you share one item you would encourage everyone to preserve today if they could choose only one? And why would you pick that?
That's very difficult, and that's extremely difficult. One item. I tried to think about it, and the only item I could come up with was a box that I have. It's a small box, and it's a wooden box, and it has all the obituaries in it. Everybody in my
Mhm.
family that passed, and there's another old Bible that has stuff in it too.
Hmm.
But this box has the obituaries. It has little articles of people that were in the newspaper for things that they were famous for. It's in this box. That's the one thing.
I think I would second that. Anything that has like a lineage in it. I know some people aren't religious, so like it doesn't have to necessarily be a Bible. It can be a journal, it can be a scribe, or sometimes like look in it. But the first thing is look everywhere
Mhm.
because they like to place stuff everywhere and hide it from themselves. So it could be a Bible, it could be a newspaper, it could be a a pay stub that they done wrote the last five histories of their life on, or the last like the family tree that they know up until that point. And so yes, for me, that has been, I think my grandfather's practice was every time that he got a new Bible was to write that lineage
Mhm.
in those. And so we have those from him. But sometimes I found calendars that he would be writing stuff down on, and it would have that information. So look everywhere is the first thing, and don't like be too fast to throw away things just because they weren't of value to you at the particular point.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, thank you both for being amazing panelists today. I feel like we had an amazing conversation. Virtual thank you to Dr. Carter. I know she had to hop off, but I think collectively, you all offered a lot to this conversation about, what does it look like to carry on this work and be a part of continuing our family archives and making sure that we're leaving something for future generations to remember, but also, in what ways are we working to bring those histories alive and not just kind of leave them in these static forms? So the art practices that each of y'all have shared, I think, um, I'm feeling very inspired about like what it can look like for me to not only preserve, but um, yeah, carry that story forward in creative ways. Like oral traditions, of course, we know are like foundational, but some of these like visual or embodied forms also offer a lot to kind of just like I don't know, bring the collection, the connection, bring the story alive in a different way. So I'm sure folks got all sorts of nuggets, some that I highlighted, others that I can't even imagine. But very happy to have this conversation recorded. And just want to say this is not the end of our virtual component of our festival. So I think we have a couple more events coming up. We have another one on Monday or Tuesday. Monday. That's about social media because, you know, social media got brought up a couple different times on the call today. But we know that there's a lot of like storytelling that's happening on social media. So we also want to be in conversation about the ways that today's like young generation is engaging with storytelling, a lot of which can be found on social media. So we'll be kind of continuing this conversation from a different perspective later on next week. But then the following weekend, for folks who are in Detroit or able to come and travel to Detroit, we will have a weekend of festivities, of events and workshops, all centered around preserving the past, documenting the now, creating the future. And so that will include presentations from the fellowship I mentioned earlier, our Preserving Black Legacy Fellowship. So we'll get to see um, five new archives created by Black Detroiters, workshops on crafting and memory, writing, a part of like how do we write our stories. So you'll hear from writers and um, publishers and bookstore owners. We have some about like video games and like how do video games connect to storytelling. We have some photography sessions, food sessions, because we know food is a big part of how we also pass down stories. So if you are in person, definitely come join us next weekend, the 15th and 16th at the Wright Museum from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. both days. And yeah, thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Saturday. For folks who are watching this in an asynchronous way, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, you know, regardless of where time lands in terms of when you're watching this. And yeah, I hope to see each of y'all soon in different ways at some point in time. It will happen. Because yeah, I'm feeling very inspired and grateful for y'all sharing your artistry and yeah, just the way that you're contributing to this work and making it possible for future generations to carry the torch forward. So
Thank you
um,
for having us. I appreciate it.
absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely.